Here we are. It's our place. And it's yours too.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Underrated Podcast. This is a film podcast. We talk about the movies that are underrated, underappreciated, and the ones that have slipped under the radar and passed most people by. I am one of your hosts, Derick McDuff, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Ariel Ortiz.
Hi.
And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Billy Ray Brewton. How's it going, Billy Ray?
It's going swell up here in Seattle. How are things in your neck of the woods?
They're pretty good here. Yeah, pretty rainy, but very, very nice here down in Southern California.
My old home.
Yeah, but things are nice here. Billy Ray, of course, for anyone who isn't familiar, is the host of the Incinerator Podcast. Does a lot of other things, screen draft, legend, all kinds of good stuff. But Billy Ray, as is the tradition here for our guests, chose our film we'll be talking about today, which is the 2004 film A Home at the End of the World, directed by Michael Mayer and based on the screenplay, which is based on his own novel by Michael Cunningham. I said that weird, but whatever. But Billy Ray, I didn't know much about this. You know, I had maybe seen a poster before with Colin Farrell. It looked vaguely familiar. Didn't know much about it. But yeah, this was your pick. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this movie and maybe your history with it and why you chose it?
Yeah, Home at the End of the World. I'm a big fan of Michael Cunningham as a writer in general. For folks who don't know, he also wrote The Hours, which was also turned into a film around this time as well. And, when the film came out, I was already familiar with Cunningham's work. I was familiar with the book. And I don't know, it came out at this time in Colin Farrell's career. I don't know if y'all know, but like actors, these young, hot actors, especially international actors, when they first become really big in the States, they will start doing 1,000 films a year. It's it's like Hollywood is like, we are going to make this person a star however the hell we get to do it. Jude Law suffered the same thing to a degree, which I think actually really hurt his career because he had a ton of films come out. They weren't all bangers. And the same thing was happening with Colin Farrell. So I wasn't particularly excited when I was hearing about Colin Farrell popping up in things, even though at the time, as a young gay guy, I was, how to say this, in love with Colin Farrell. And still am. And so this film just kind of came out of nowhere for me to a degree. Like I said, I was familiar with it, but I didn't even have any, cognizance that it was even being turned into a film. And it's one that I've always championed over the years because I feel like it gets left behind not only as a Colin Farrell film, but it also gets left behind as sort of a queer romance or a queer film. And this is one of the only films that I can think of as a queer person that really does speak in earnest to the polyamory side of queerness and speaks to the chosen family side of queerness in a way that films around that time really weren't concentrated on. And so it's got a soft spot in my heart for those reasons. And also, I just think it's a really fun, sweet, good movie. And so I'm always happy to proselytize for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely feel with you about it being like forgotten or left behind as a queer movie, because even the synopsis of it kind of and even the poster kind of doesn't really show that or or even mention it, because the synopsis essentially is like a love triangle and they don't really say which way that love triangle spins. So it was very like I went in, blind essentially with it, and it was very much like once the moment happens in their childhood, I will say, when they're teenagers, I was like, oh, it's gonna be this kind of triangle, okay. Yeah. So kind of like from that moment, you kind of go on forth, and yeah, it is very much a very subtle love story, in my opinion. I mean, you get these different characters that some are sure about themselves, others are unsure, or like just because I get that sense with Colin Farrell's character of he's just kind of like an unsure guy, doesn't have much experience with anything, but his main thing, because of all the trauma in his life, he just knows that he doesn't want to be alone.
Yeah.
But I feel for him like very much like he might be either, not to put labels on him, but bisexual or even pansexual in a way, because he just like, you get that feeling of like he just loves everybody and everyone kind of thing. Even the vibes coming off of him and the mob were kind of getting there too. I was like,
there
okay.
are moments.
I know.
Are Colin Farrell and Sissy Spacek about to get it on?
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, for me too. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, it's even like his deck when he says "I love you" to her after the father dies. You kind of get that sense of like, oh, is he like really proclaiming like real love and stuff? But I think it's just he just loves everybody and everyone. And that's, in a sense, he kind of reminded me, like thinking on the movie itself and his character, it kind of reminded me of Charlie in Perks of Being a Wallflower, but in the kind of opposite way, where there's a moment of that in that movie where he kind of just doesn't know what he's doing, but then he ends up with I can't remember her name, but ends up with his main love interest in the end too. So so you kind of get that sense, and I was very surprised that like I would have thought that the friend would I was very surprised that like I thought he would like push away his queerness like going forward into in the adulthood. So it was very interesting to see like, oh no, he actually did embrace his queerness. And then this whole polyamorous kind of thing happening, and then just it just speaks like a real life kind of situation, and just a scenario of like people's feelings changing and stuff like that, because I feel very much like at the beginning of the throuples like relationship, I can't remember names, I'm so sorry, but
well, Jonathan is the Dallas Roberts character, and Claire is the Robin Wright character.
Thank you. Robin Wright. Claire's character was kind of like open to that, and that's what she kind of actually wanted, but once her and Colin Farrell's character's daughter kind of came and she became a mother, she started to feel like she wanted something different, and like she went back how her conversation with the mom was like, I kind of wanted, when I was a kid, I did want that like kind of normal, she says, family dynamic. And I think that in that moment you see that kind of turn on her of like, oh, that is actually what she wants. And so it is understandable, like she moves on and like lets both of them go in a way. And it is very heartbreaking at the end, with Jonathan clearly like has markings of the development of AIDS, and you kind of feel sad that this love was like kind of short-lived, and it's going to be that way. You don't know where, but in a sense also like I said, it's a very subtle movie, because in a sense also you kind of get that sense maybe in that moment that Colin Farrell's character is okay with being alone, like in that way
for the first time,
kind of, because he did finally figure out who he really did love this whole time. And so it's very heartbreaking of an ending, but it is very it takes you on this very easy, in the end you kind of see it like, oh, it's like a very natural journey, very pretty short of a movie. I think like maybe about an
like
hour and 45
minutes.
Exactly. So it was a really nice story, and once you kind of get the sense of like the direction that you follow Colin Farrell, like I get that feeling of like he's an unsure character throughout the majority of the time, but then he solidifies in his trajectory of his life in a way, because he has some kind of like Arrested Development a bit. And so you kind of get, once he becomes more sure of the person that he is, I feel like the story kind of solidifies itself as well.
I think that's fair. And I think, to me, this film has always been, the first act is Colin Farrell basically everything he thought he needed in life to survive slowly gets peeled away from him.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the second half where he starts rebuilding that back. And then you have the third act, which is basically showing him the things he actually needs to survive. And yeah, I think he's the fascinating part about this film to me. There are multiple fascinating parts, but his is the big one because he is such sort of a blank slate. In a lot of ways, he's the character that all the other characters can kind of assign their desires and all of these things on him. But the Robin Wright character, the older I get and the more I rewatch this film, becomes the more fascinating character to me because I really do feel like she has the most difficult choices to make in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I first saw this film, I watched it thinking, the decision that she makes at the end being all like, oh, what a selfish decision and blah, blah, blah. But now that I'm older and I can look through it through different lenses, it's like, okay, she made the right decision for her and for her kid. And that's what I like about this film. It's like, there aren't many films because, I'm reaching the point now, I'm about to turn 41. And I've reached the point over the last 2 or 3 years where I start seeing all of these things that if you would have asked me 10 years ago and I would be like, oh, I want this and I want this. I'll never do this. I'll never do this. I can't think of one of those things that still holds any water. Like the older I get, the more those priorities change. And it's so nice to see a film where you can on screen see the priority of the characters change from beginning to end. And I don't get to see that a lot. So.
Yeah, no, like, yeah, this, I'm always a little bit nervous. I'm always excited to have guests on, but I always, and have them make their pick. But I know what Ariel and my other co-host Alan are going to give me. Whenever I have a new entity, you're always like, all right, what's this one going to be? And especially when it's a film like this, I know nothing about. So I always go in with a little bit of trepidation, but that was very, very quickly erased. I was so enthralled by this movie almost instantly. Just the vibes of it, even when it starts, you start to see his kind of like early childhood and just all the things that these kind of really traumatic events that showed why he just feels like he always needs someone. And then, especially once it jumps ahead to his early 20s, when he is really, like so many of us are at that age, just trying to figure out who he is and what his identity is. And like, they don't really throw out labels with him, but him trying to figure out like who he is and who he should love and his relationships with these people. And, like you guys already mentioned, like, with the Sissy Spacek character, he's like, this is a figure who is a mother figure, but there's clearly that attraction that he has to her there, and he has all these really conflicted emotions towards her, and then towards Jonathan, he's someone who is both a lover and a brother to him, and they have all that, and that's all stuff that I really related to just in my 20s, trying to figure myself out and who I am and what I mean and what my life means and stuff, and all of that just really, really spoke to me and deeply affected me. And the more it got into the film, the more I was feeling it, especially once Robin Wright's character got introduced, who I didn't know she was in this. And as soon as she showed up, I was like, oh my God, she's one of my absolute favorite actresses. So that was like an extra surprise. That happened, and then you had the Colin Farrell glow up happening. I was like, man, this guy, that is an all-time glow up when he cuts his long hair, and I'm just like,
oh man,
no, it's the classic Colin Farrell look. That's why it's like they had to get to that. Like he kept that look for like a decade,
And also, let's just be clear: if you have to cast somebody in a film who is supposed to be like the perfect guy that all the guys want and the girls want and the moms want. How do you do any better than Colin Farrell circa 2004? Like, dude was just like on another level of gorgeous that I don't know that anybody has caught up with yet.
Yeah.
No one ever will. Which is like, sidebar real fast, people always like to say that the Brad Pitt thing about him being a character actor who's just too pretty. I think that applies so much to Colin Farrell. And, that's why he got shoehorned into movies like Alexander and Phone Booth and stuff like that, where he is they're trying to make him this dramatic leading man. And I think he's so much more interesting in a film like this, or even something like a Minority Report, where he's like an interesting, quirky, supporting character or weird lead. And that's why I think like this past year, when he got to be these four interesting like Banshees of Inisherin and After Yang and all these great movies that he was in 2022, you're really getting to see Colin Farrell finally get to play some of these juicy roles that he got to play early in his career before he became such a huge thing. But to go a little bit more on the like, wow, this guy's so handsome, you wouldn't expect him really to be a virgin, especially like him like seeing, being introduced to sex at a very early age with that scene with his brother, but that clearly messed him up and stunted it in some way. And that scene when he loses his virginity to Robin Wright and he just starts crying, that hit me so hard. I was like, that is so emotional. Like when he has this intense, tender moment that, and like a lot of times in movies, like you see in a movie that I love, The Notebook, like when they lose their virginity, it's like this beautiful, nice moment. And then in the reality, it's like when you have a moment like that with somebody, it's not always like butterflies and stuff. It might be special, but you're having all these really conflicted emotions, and just the way his performance sells it so much. It really hit me. The way all three of them have this really interesting, complicated relationship is something else I really related to. I'm like I said, I was always kind of questioning things about myself, and ultimately, despite TikTok thinking I'm a lesbian, I'm a straight guy, but nevertheless, I still have dated a lot of queer people, and me, I'll be you'll end up in weird situations. I'm always kind of the what do you like the cute gamer, or the boy with the golden retriever energy who ends up dating a bisexual girl, and then I get in I'm like the Robin Wright character, where you're in these weird situations where it's like, oh, me and my ex-girlfriend, and then we all both have a crush on the same girl. So I related to all of that stuff, and these weird situations of queerness and stuff, like that how, like you said, Billy Ray, how weird and messy and things like that can be, where relationships and things like that are so muddily defined, and just you're trying to figure out who anybody is to you at any point, I thought was really well done in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to hear that y'all enjoyed it so much, because I'm glad that just anybody's getting extra eyes on it. I do want to mention too, it opens with one of the most insane, like, shocking death sequences.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Which it's like it's sadly at that time, and it is
was
like
a real thing.
Yeah, it was a real thing. And like for us growing in the 90s became like the wise tales of like be careful and stuff like that. Nowadays, you have thick ass glass and stuff like that, or like polycarbonate, essentially, whatever. But those like moments, like where like, because when it happened, I was like, I had to remind myself of like, oh yeah, that happened back then. They were so thin and like the glass, and I was just like, yeah, you get that heartbrokenness too from it, because you felt like the brother was such a influential person to him. Like I don't agree with him giving him like paint to taste and stuff like that. Gave him psychedelics, but
it was a different
time.
I was like, is this smart tissue?
I
guess the sense that whole family was like that though. Like but it was a different time.
For folks who don't know what we're talking about, at the beginning of the film, there's a character who is running back towards a party. They've all been drinking and doing psychedelics and stuff, and he doesn't realize that the sliding glass door is closed, and he plows through the sliding glass door. And at first you don't know. At first you're like, oh, that's kind of funny. And then you don't know if it's serious or not. And then the moment they pull that enormous shard of glass out of his throat, you're like, okay, this shit's for real. And there's still like a few minutes where you're like, wait, did that just happen? Like, is this a real thing that just happened in this movie?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a thing that happened back then. And you can see why. I mean, our thing, we had a sliding glass door when I was a kid, but it was always, my mom would want there to be, my mom would never clean the door too much because she wanted there to be smudges for the birds.
Mm-hmm.
In case a bird was flying in, she didn't want it to smack into it. In hindsight, it probably saved her children's lives too. But yeah, I mean that kind of sets the movie off with this really high tempo, just right off the get go. And there's some beautiful. I want to mention just Michael Mayer, who directed this film, who is one of my absolute all time favorite stage directors. directed the original production of Spring Awakening and
As
American Idiot, and like an incredible amount of like amazing Broadway shows that he's directed. And he's directed some other films and stuff too, but he's got such a penchant for music and the right music at the right time, and the soundtrack to this film is phenomenal. And I think specifically about for me, like there's a great scene where they're riding in the truck singing "Look Out Cleveland" by the band, that amazing Yaz song, which this film turned me on to Yaz, which plays when Colin Farrell first arrives in the city. And then of course you got the Laura Nero sequence with him and Sissy Spacek, which is just beautiful. It's just the music here and the scores by Duncan Sheik, it all just works together so well.
Yeah. For speaking of that, because I was very surprised, like when I saw Duncan Sheik's name there, and it was like, this kind of makes sense because it does give you kind of like the sense of like a Spring Awakening kind of thing, like Spring Awakening.
Yeah,
and it makes sense, with it being directed by the same guy too, because there's just such kind of like a insight to this kind of like sexuality and stuff, and Spring Awakening explicitly is about sexuality of teenagers and stuff. So I could definitely see that, and that's why I was like, oh, that like it just clicked that makes sense. And then you furthering it, saying like, oh no, it's also directed by the one that did Spring Awakening, and also elements of like American Idiot kind of like play into that too. But yeah, it definitely makes sense. Like, and kind of.
Yeah. It's just very, as a period piece, it's really thought out. It doesn't beat you over the head with the fact that it's a period piece. It's like it's subtle in the way it kind of lets you know where it's coming from. But yeah, it's just I just think it's a sweet, lovely, wonderful little film. Like it's hard to like. Is it like the best made film you're ever going to see? No. Is it the best shot film you're ever going to see? No. But it's like everything works really well. Everybody in the cast is putting so much into it. Even the supporting characters who are fantastic as well. And it has that ability, and like you spoke to this earlier, Derick, it has that ability to really sneak up on you as like an emotional experience. And for a 96 minute movie, with like, I don't know, I think it's kind of an accomplishment that it kind of hits you the way it does with what it's packing.
Yeah, definitely. And to me, it felt honestly so ahead of its time, because even though at the time I felt like, there are a lot of films that, touch on, people who are gay and things like that, especially this was around the time when they were addressing like the AIDS epidemic that was going on in the 80s and on all that stuff. But this film really feels like it was so ahead of its time in dealing with just the complexities of sexuality and just how it's such a spectrum, and it's not just like, oh, you're gay, you're straight. Because around the at the same time you're having like Will and Grace be like, bisexuality isn't a thing, and this really felt like, wow, no, like we get it now. We understand that there are, like you were saying, Ariel, bisexual people, pansexual people who identify as non-binary, like any number of thing, and just Colin Farrell especially just feels like someone who is a character that feels like he was written in his character feels like he was written in 2023, about how he is just this. They never even label him in the movie, and he's just trying to figure it out, and he's just trying to understand himself and how he feels and how he should feel. And there's this tension between the three of them, because it's like, oh, I was in love with you and you were in love with me, but maybe they're more in love with you, and I thought you were this and I thought you were that. And the way it all does that, it's so subtly done. And I think with, like you were saying, Billy Ray, it's not like an incredibly shot movie. This isn't Decision to Leave or something like that, where you're like marveling at how it looks. But the script is so good, and the acting is so incredible and so real. And you do still get really great cinematic moments. Like when they're looking over the Grand Canyon was one that really spoke to me. And yeah, just that's why I felt like it was so powerful.
I would have to just disagree on like, I feel like this like marked and the whole like that notion of like oh, it's ahead of its time and stuff like that. I think it was actually very much of its time, and that's the whole point. I think just people nowadays don't really have just finally caught on to kind of like this kind of notion of life in the mainstream. But I mean, even right when this movie was made, like we mentioned, like things existed, but you had to go and search them out. You know, at this point, by now, Jonathan Larson had already written not just, you know, Rent, but also Tick Tick Boom. You had that in the pop culture notion, and it's and then also other kind of movies of that time, you know, kind of touched on that. But I did enjoy, yeah, just the subtlety even of that, of, and like I said, like it feeling very much like a real life story, because you don't have to like go full on blown like oh, this the AIDS pandemic, and just the kind of, yeah, the subtlety of it being told and stuff like that. So I think it I guess in that sense ahead of its time, where you don't really have to like say it out loud, like what's going on with Jonathan, and then it's just kind of like it flow, like you said, kind of flows together and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, and 2004 is an interesting thing too, because 2004 is actually, because another film that kind of deals with bisexuality or like labelless sort of existences that came out the same year was Kinsey, with Liam Neeson, who is also a bisexual character, and that's actually a big point of that film. And it did film. I definitely agree with you on this front, in that, Ariel, that like there are definitely films out there. You know, as you know, I've been programming queer films since this movie came out, and like there's so many great films like this out there. You just can't find them anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you can now a lot better than you could then, because obviously Hulu has an amazing queer section, and a lot of streamers, you know, you can find some of these lost films. And I always encourage people to, because and this is hardly mainstream. Like, I mean, it's mainstream in the extent that it's got high profile cast, but it was a, you know, 1.5, I think, or no, maybe it was more than that. It's a few $1 million budget, but still not huge. And like, for every one of these, there's like 20 other hidden gems from this same time period that you know, that feature, you know, all these different types of sexualities, which we just didn't get to see, you know, in the mainstream sense back then. We were starting to, like, for all the good things Will and Grace did, it did just as many bad things.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you just mentioned one earlier, which is the whole bisexuality doesn't exist, which is like, so for all the good things it did an equal amount of bad things. But we did start seeing kind of especially in the early 2000s, we started to slowly see a more creeping acceptance of queerness in the mainstream. And when I say slow, I mean to the point where, like, even now in 2023, we're still creeping.
Yeah.
We're still creeping. Like,
yeah,
you know, I mean, yeah, we got Bros this year. We got Spoiler Alert. So the white gay guys are doing great. But everybody else, that's just, Hollywood's like, fuck you.
Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, like I said, it really hit me, because I was, you know, I'm somebody who's kind of existed just on, you know, I don't want to like try and like claim anything that like take anything away from anyone, but like I've always just kind of been on the fringes, you know, of
Sure.
queerness, and just to see a movie that like kind of was like, okay, like, you know, it's just not like Will and Grace, where it's just like, oh, there is no such thing as in between. You're either this or you're that.
Yeah.
It felt really interesting, and it did speak to me in a lot of ways. And I think that's really cool, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. So my day job is I run a pretty large queer nonprofit here in Seattle called $3 Bill Cinema, and we do Seattle Queer Film Festival and Translations, which is our trans film festival. And so we do a lot of cool stuff for all different, for the diaspora of the queer community. And we were discussing, we do an outdoor screening series, and one of the films we were talking about sort of as a group, and it's a pretty diverse group, was whether or not to screen Home at the End of the World. And because we were wanting to screen, you know, something that was that could appeal to different communities, but also something that was not as dour as some of the other films. And so it ended up getting shot down because the majority of the group thought it did not appeal to enough members of the queer community.
Hmm.
That was they thought, and because I'm saying this because I want y'all's take on it, and they thought that even though it deals with a lot of different sexualities, that it is primarily catered to cis white gay guys.
I could see that, I guess. I mean, if you want like like you said, it's few and far between for like ethnic scenarios and stuff like that. So yes. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can only speak to because I am a
Sure.
a straight white woman and stuff. But
Sure.
yeah, like I guess a bit, but I think it's just like scenario wise, it is very, in my opinion, like very over. Like it covers a lot, like
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
yeah. But I could see, I guess, like a little bit of on that fringe of like playing that role. But if you see it from like I guess it just depends on which side you see it from or what outlook. If it's like yes, technically it is to white cis white males and then a white woman, but but overall the whole scenario of their like triangle, I know, that's my opinion.
See, I put Colin Farrell in the same camp as I do someone like Michael B. Jordan, which is when you've reached a certain level of being so gorgeous, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are, what you believe, where you're from. You should just be put on that pedestal of gorgeousness, regardless. Those are two entrants that I will humbly submit to the committee. Yeah. That was just always so. I didn't disagree with them either. I mean, we're talking about a film that is directed by, actually, I don't even know if Michael Mayer is gay or straight. It feels like I've always thought he was gay, but then I looked it up and he was like totally straight. Nope, I'm wrong. He is gay. He is queer as a $3 bill. So, you do have a gay guy, a white gay guy, directing a bisexual. I mean, let's just be clear. There's very little doubt in my head that Colin Farrell's bisexual. Yeah. In real life, maybe I'm forecasting that on him.
You're just hoping. You always leave that door open.
Yeah. So, but it's like, white bisexual guy, another white gay guy, Robin Wright, who is every gay guy's fantasy crush. Like, I don't know. I see where it seems definitely tailored towards a cis gay male gaze.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving you those little things that you want from a movie like that. It's just doing it, I think, with a little bit more of a deft hand than some of the other mainstream films. Like a good example, a very different movie, but I don't know if y'all have seen Spoiler Alert yet.
I haven't.
No, I haven't yet.
So it's the one that just came out. It's Jim Parsons, and it's based on Michael Ausiello's book from TV Guide, and it's an interesting sort of counterpoint to this in terms of like seeing how far we've come in the way we deal with not only like gayness in mainstream film, but also bisexuality, because his character is a bisexual in the film as well. Not Jim Parsons. Dude could never play a bisexual convincingly. Sorry, Jim.
Yeah.
But Ben Aldridge is the bisexual character. And I don't know. It was just interesting. And I thought of this film when I was watching Spoiler Alert, because they have some similar themes. There's some illness in there and other things. And it was just like, it was talking back to what you were kind of speaking about there. It almost made me feel like this film was a little bit ahead of its time, because it's like the way it's dealing with similar subject matter feels so more advanced and feels so more contemporary than anything Spoiler Alert's doing. Spoiler Alert feels like it could have been written by Neil Simon in 1977.
I think just things go backwards. So, I mean, yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe we learn from our mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Or no, actually, that would be the opposite.
No, yeah,
of that.
the opposite, exactly.
We're doomed to repeat
Yeah.
them. I just find myself thinking that a lot these days, because I still watch an inordinate amount of queer cinema, and I'll watch something and I'll be like, wait a second, this film did this better back in 1997. And it felt fresher. Like it feels like everything is just getting homogenized down.
I think it's just I think it's just something that happens with like, it's in some instances in all genres, you get these like really awesome tales of like, I'm just going to take from my experience, Hispanic Mexican kind of movies, and telling of a Mexican family. We had Real Women Have Curves in the early 2000s, but then you kind of go and like have these stupid, just like stereotypical movies of I can't think of anything right now, but they have existed after, real women have curves, which is not a bad thing. We have our jokes and stuff like that, but then it's kind of like it's just towing the line with way too much. Like we need to get back into like something like more authentic. So now you have like good champion of like Namor in Wakanda Forever, and then also like if you're looking for like for a Mexican story, definitely there's a Hulu show called This Fool, which is just like pure perfect being Mexican American in Southern California. Definitely a perfect story of that. But yeah, like I think it's just like something that exists it happens in every genre of just kind of like you got to it's a spectrum. Everything is a spectrum, and it's just like you got to like I don't want to, but yeah, like to use a Tropic Thunder kind of you went full you went full R word kind of thing. So it's kind of like I think it just happens sometimes, and in every genre, while there's like really good touching like emotional stories, true life stories, there's also that gimmick or stereotypical kind of story always like on that side too. Yeah.
Well, I also feel like I almost feel like part of it kind of echoes how I feel like art in this country, at least, is closing in on itself. It's sort of getting, I hate using the words like conservative, but it is moving more conservative in what I see. And not only just the types of things that are being produced, but like the way they're being presented, the access that's being given to people to see them, the way that's kind of shrinking. It feels weird to me. And I think that's part of it as well, which makes sense to me with something like, spoiler alert, why it would feel like it could have been something that was made 30 or 40 years ago, because it's almost like we're backpedaling to that time in some way. And or at least, and this is just me obviously speaking from my personal feelings, but that's just kind of the way maybe that's the way that it feels to me. And I hope, obviously I don't want that to happen. I want us to start, because, even like I'm thinking about like everybody's talking about 2022. Everybody I talk to, one of the best years for film of recent, like such a great year for film. And I don't disagree necessarily. I started thinking back and I was like, okay, what is that one film that I saw this year that I've never seen anything like it before? And there's always been one that I could pinpoint, and I couldn't pinpoint one this year. And not that there weren't amazing films. It was an amazing year for film. Mm-hmm. But there was not one film where I was like, damn, like that was the one. And this is all me just ranting based on the fact that I feel like movies aren't queer enough, y'all. Movies aren't queer enough. If you're going to make it a queer movie, God damn it, make it a queer movie.
Dude, wait. I have a movie. Did you see Triple R? Did you see RRR?
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Because there's some subtlety there. You can add that.
That is the greatest buddy movie ever made.
Yeah. If you want to toe the line, like this movie does.
I don't even think there's a toe on the line. I think you could straight up say those guys have been intimate with each other.
It was a really good year for buddy films, I feel like. I'll just, tangent here, but you had RR, you had Banshees of Inisherin, a great breakup buddy movie, and then you had Ambulance, which is a movie nobody's talking about, but a great movie about bros, I thought it was great. But I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents on, you guys' question about like, why do you think we've maybe taken a step back in certain respects? And I feel like this movie, because it was made first, like I looked up the budget was $6.5 million. It's it's an indie film. I think that you are able to kind of slide by and just tell whatever story you want without getting too many studio notes.
That's why indie films are the best.
And yes, I mean, indie films are amazing. And then when you start to get a bigger studio, bigger budget, obviously Colin Farrell's a big star, but he's still kind of an indie guy. When you get these people coming on board and you get rewrites and stuff like that from the studios, you end up with something like I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, which started as like the original screenplay was a very like touching queer film. And then it became a Happy Madison production and it became a gay panic movie. And I think that's that these, like, especially at this time period, you do get these indies that are allowed to exist. And maybe now, even now, like, a lot of the best queer films are stuff like Moonlight that are like independent, because the studios are like, well, we can't play this in China, so we've got to cut out the gay kid. We can put in some gay stuff, but we've got to, like, make sure that we can cut out the Dumbledore saying that he's gay so that it can play in China. And that stuff is obviously incredibly frustrating. And I do think that these films that are able to operate on a smaller budget are able to say so much more for that reason. And hopefully, I think that is starting to change. And we are just, like you said, it's molasses in an igloo slow. But I do think we are starting to see maybe some bigger budget things letting some of this stuff in, starting to see stuff. Like, it's not a movie, but, like, the queer romance in Andor, I thought was really cool.
The problem is that you're right. It's just they're not making any money.
Mm.
And that's the problem, is like Bros, there was all that talk about why Bros didn't do as well as it was supposed to. At the end of the day, it was just marketed poorly.
Yeah.
Studio did not know what to do with it or how to market it, and they fucked it up. And then it was like, oh, well, spoiler alert, didn't do great either. And it's like, well, what do you expect from a sad 2-hour drama about two gay guys and one of them is dying of cancer? Like, that is not a crowd pleaser, no matter how much you try to market it as a Christmas movie. And so I feel like all of queer cinema is now getting judged on the backs of two films that are solely non-representative of the majority of queer community that I am part of and that I know. And then I think back and I'm like, I don't know that Brokeback Mountain would be made today.
Mm-hmm.
Not the way that it was. And yeah, I realize that I'm name dropping a film that stars two straight dudes and is directed by a straight guy, but, like, okay, I'm a queer person, I can do it. But, like, that film, for all people want to say about it, I think it's, regardless of how you feel about its place in history and blah blah blah, I think it's a gorgeously made film and very well intentioned from everybody involved. But that film made money, and it deals with some kind of, like, pretty perverse moments of, like, gay affection and gay sex in that film. And I'm like, I don't think that would get released today. Mm-hmm. Because it's not spoiler alerty enough. Like, it's not brosy enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I say. By now, in fairness, you could make the case that Brokeback Mountain is an indie film to some degree too. I mean, it's hard to do that when it's Heath Ledger, Jake Gyllenhaal, Anne Hathaway, and Ang Lee. But you could still make the case that that's still somewhat of an indie film as well. And maybe this is just a reminder to, not a reminder, but, I do often think, as a member of the queer community, I want to be served by film and by television and all of these things. I want to be served, and I want to be served in an equitable way, but I don't expect everything to be catered to me. Like, I understand that I am still an enormous minority of the population. I don't need everything catered to me. And so I don't know. I just feel like we're in an interesting spot with queer cinema. I don't know where it's going to go, frankly. I'm optimistic, but I'm also like, is queer cinema just done on a mainstream scale?
I think it's very much like, just like, because what I see with the spoiler alert and Bros coming out, it feels very much like an early 2000s cis, relationship comic movies that are coming out. So yeah, like, I think it's just like, with everything, just treat it as you would treat a normal story, just treat it as that, kind of thing. It's like where it lies. And that's why this movie, did that. It treated it just like a normal story kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's not like playing into like, any kind of situation or like that. Like, very much I'm feeling like that. And it's unfortunately with pop culture and like stereotypes and stuff like that. Like, it's very much feels like the gay best friend kind of movies kind of thing. And so I feel very much like movies just need to like treat it as just another movie, just another script, just another everyday life kind of thing.
I agree. I agree. And I think that's a good point. And I agree. And I'm probably a little too harsh and I know I'm too harsh on films like Bros and Spoiler Alert because I mean they are for the most part catered to me. And I think it's just because also just from having programmed queer films for so long, I've seen so many of those stories that when I see another one that has all of that money and talent behind it, I'm like, oh, but you could have done better.
Yeah,
you could have done better.
I would make the argument that same thing's happening to like normal. I mean, like I'm like cis, like romantics as well. Like last year had that "Marry Me" movie.
That's fair,
and like all these other ones. Yeah,
mid-budget movies are having a rough time. Like you're still getting your indies and you're still getting the big budget ones, but where these movies would exist, mid-budget, like $40 to $100 million, $80 million, whatever, are starting to kind of vanish other than on streaming, you know. And it's something I brought up on the show before, but I think that it really fits with these kind of films that we're talking about here.
I think the problem overall just is like that big budget movies need to stop making these dumb romantic comedies kind of thing. So
I mean that is part. That makes me feel actually a little bit better because you are right. Like I mean that is a part of it too because Bros and Spoiler Alert, I'm sure were both made and they're mid-budget films to a large degree. And I mean, even the definition of mid-budget has changed. But it's like, it's crazy. I'm just interested to see where it goes because I honestly don't know. I've thought for a while now I was going to figure it out, and I'm like, I'm just never going to figure it out. Like I feel like, you know, just look at where we are as a country. That's a good litmus test on where we are in terms of film, in terms of representing any person or any group.
Well, one thing that I was thinking about is that I think where we really need to go to like make progress, and a film that I just saw that really kind of amazed me to like on this level of how amazing and diverse it was Wendell and Wild, which is Henry Selick's new film, his first film since 2009. And Henry Selick he's a straight cis white dude, and he is somebody who he's been an outsider in the industry, but he's somebody who has the power to make a movie. And when he got his chance to make this movie this year, every single character in that, none of them is just they're all either they're queer or they're a racial minority or they're women or the one white guy I think he's not able-bodied. So it was just such an interesting, diverse cast, and then obviously it was co-written by Key and Peele. And I think that's what we need more of, is just be like, here's a story with just diverse characters, just diverse people, and it doesn't ever like really like shine a light on anything. It's never like, oh, this is happening, like this is happening. It's just, these are just people that just exist. And for him to be just this creator who was like bringing in Key and Peele and these people with other backgrounds and experiences and visions than him, and to just like it was kind of an amazing thing to watch, to see just all of this diversity in this movie that like was just like about like demons and spookiness. You know, it's a very Henry Selick movie. It's a very much like, oh, there's like this other world and there's spooky things going on. But it was just like, there was all of these just diverse walks of life of everyone you can imagine. And I know that's animated and it was just a straight to Netflix thing, but I really do think that is the way of the future, is just being inserting just everyone, queer people, into films, and just honestly having it kind of not be a huge deal. And that's kind of something that I really liked about this, and I thought was ahead of its time, was while there is sad stuff in this movie, that like there is like they do touch on the AIDS thing, nothing in this movie is like them having to deal with not being accepted for who they are. It's about them figuring themselves out, but like, and there is like maybe a moment where like he's just like, oh, I should leave because Sissy Spacek, but people, like, everyone just, they all accept each other. You don't see like hate crimes or anything going on. It just feels like a movie where it's just these people figuring themselves out and not having to deal with like, they don't make it, it's not like Philadelphia or something where it's like, okay, let's just make a movie about bigotry, which is obviously important. Like, those stories do need to be told, but it doesn't need to be every story, if that makes sense. I agree. And those are my favorite types of films in general, like, are the ones that don't like draw attention to themselves in a way that I don't like. Like, where they're not, where every character isn't walking on screen going, I am a homosexual.
Yep.
and where every contrivance isn't based around that. And this film does do a good job of that. And the films that do are generally going to be the ones that I respond to the most. The ones where, and a good example of that, I always try to give them credit for it. But the Farrelly brothers, in all of their early films, they were so good at highlighting disabled characters. But they would do it in ways they were always in on the joke. They were not the butt of it. They were always just regular characters. Like one might show up as a gas station attendant or at a restaurant. And like, it was never called attention to anything that was wrong with them. They were just playing a character in the film. And like, they did that in a way that I haven't seen a lot of people do, which is a really ironic considering one of them has a new movie coming out called The Champions, which is entirely about the fact that they are differently abled because it's Woody Harrelson coaching a team of differently abled
that
kids.
movie. Okay, yeah.
But because it's them or one half of them, I'm going to give it a shot. I think if anybody can pull it off, they can. But all that is to say is like, yeah, that authenticity, I think the older I get, the more and more I respond to. I'm less pop and flash and more substance.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to the notion of like something could be a part of the character's personality, but it shouldn't be their personality. I think it like that's just good writing, good character writing. Is like a character is multifaceted. They're not just one thing kind of thing. So yeah.
But if anybody walked up to me on the street and they were asked like, how do you identify? And this is something that we do. We do a lot in with my day job when I'm running an event or something like that. And I'm, for accessibility reasons and everything, you go through, you talk about who you are, you talk about how you identify, you describe yourself, all those fun things. And so like, I would describe myself as a lot of things before I would say a gay man. Like that's in there. It's certainly part of the mix. It's definitely that, but it wouldn't even be in the top 3 things I would say. And so I think that's a lot of people. I think we have because so many people are having to battle to be accepted, the way they want to be accepted. Because they're having to battle for that, I don't know. I feel like we take for granted sometimes. I don't want to get on a preachy seminar because we're talking about a movie that isn't a preachy seminar at all. It's a beautiful little love story. It's a cute, beautiful little love story that introduced me to Yaz.
No, well put.
And I also will just say too, we have not mentioned the name Matt Frewer yet, but for all of your Max Headroom fans out there, Matt Frewer himself is in this film.
Oh yeah,
for sure. Ex-husband.
Yeah, I know him as the dad, the neighborhood dad from. Yep. That's how I know him.
Yep, that's it.
Yep.
People either know him these days. It's either Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's Max Headroom, or it's the Dawn of the Dead remake.
I'm the one weirdo who knows him from Eureka.
Eureka too.
A good one.
Yeah, Eureka too. He wasn't in Eureka as much though.
Yeah. I did watch the hell out of that show back in the day.
I know. We could go into. This is something I've been wanting to like do because I've been wanting to do that TED Talk series. But one of the topics I want to do is just how amazing early 2000s sci-fi channel was. I definitely want to do that.
Well, let me plant this bug in your ear because I host a show called The Incinerator where guests come on and they incinerate ridiculous topics. And this season we've opened that up, so it's not just films anymore. We've got folks coming on to do television series. We've got folks who are coming on to do deaths in a franchise.
Yeah,
like we're opening up to all sorts of things. So if y'all ever wanted to come on and do some sort of weird sci-fi 90s sci-fi,
I'll come on in a heartbeat, Billy Ray.
I will talk about the early 2000 sci-fis. You got the really good adaptation of 4400. You had or Eureka. You had Warehouse 13. You had oh my gosh, so many like really good Haven too. I was just thinking about Haven as well. There's just so much.
What's the one that I remember that Eddie Cibrian was in? He was the lead in, and it was about. I feel like it was from the guys who did Lost.
That's Zone 2.
I mean, I would know it if
Oh.
it was from the guys who did. Wait, was Carlton or Damon? Because
Invasion. It was called Invasion.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
I don't
that
know
was
if that
it.
was in.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't either of the guys who had Lost, but I know what show you're talking about because I'm the
Yeah.
I don't know if
the
that was
Lost
like
expert on the
sci-fi.
show.
I know Battlestar Galactica was part of that too. I think it was on Sci-Fi, ran on Sci-Fi as well. Yeah, the early 2000s Sci-Fi Channel. I could definitely go and have a
back
talk
when it
about
was still
I've been thinking about
SCIFI.
Sliders.
It was in between that. It was in between the two. It started that era started off as SCIFI, but then in the middle of it turned into SYFY. Yeah.
Okay, so I automatically know that we're going to do something to do with the Sci-Fi Channel,
Yeah.
and so that's definitely going to happen.
All right, excellent.
Wow.
Yeah, I bought those DVDs when they came out, man. I loved early 2000s sci-fi, Eureka, and like I said, Warehouse
Did you
13.
Did you watch the non-sci-fi stuff like Sliders?
Sliders was like a little bit earlier in that for my time. I think Sliders was
Okay.
like mid 90s or late 90s. Yeah. I know of Sliders. Yeah.
I know
think,
it wasn't. I was gonna say I know it wasn't Sci-Fi Channel, but you know what my favorite time period weird sci-fi show was, and Billy Ray. I don't know. I feel like this might have been a Billy Ray show. Did you ever watch Kyle XY?
Kyle XY, yes. Like, speaking of a
I was
hot
obsessed
man,
with Matt Dallas.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Oh my gosh, Kyle XY
yeah.
had such good lore. Like it was
The hottest thing in the world is fucking Matt Dallas without a belly button.
Yeah.
Like that's the hottest thing in the world. Yeah, I've always had that one like teen sci-fi horror show that I always watch. Like Riverdale has been that show for
Oh, dude.
Oh yeah, I just binged all of Wednesday, so I get you, my dude.
No, Wednesday's mainstream. Riverdale
And Teen
is
Wolf. I was a huge
Teen Wolf.
Teen Wolf guy.
Yes. Yes.
I'm a massive Teen Wolf fan, and the movie drops on my birthday.
Oh my gosh, I know. I'm just so sad that Styles, my boy, my love, is not on it.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Earlier today, you would have seen my Dylan O'Brien T-shirt that I have.
I have
And,
his jersey shirt. I have a jersey
Do you
shirt.
know how many podcasts I have been on just to proselytize Dylan O'Brien?
Oh my gosh, Dylan O'Brien. I'm happy that he's getting some he still is working and stuff like that, but I'm he really needs something good. He really does. I know that it was that lying kind of movie. He got some pretty good buzz around.
Oh, which one?
The one that came out last year. But I just love Dylan O'Brien.
No, he's Dylan O'Brien. I was looking through my drawer where my Dylan O'Brien phone case is.
Oh yeah.
And big Dylan O'Brien fan. And very excited. It's got a horror film coming out this year.
Yeah.
And then also got.
Yeah.
I'm also part of me is like, are they gonna?
I think they're gonna sneak him in. I think they're gonna sneak him in.
I feel like they're gonna sneak him in too.
He's gonna come in as the FBI agent. He's already a full blown FBI agent. I'm sure him and Lydia have been just having a relationship off screen. You know, he can't leave his banshee. You know, kind of thing.
Because I also can't believe. I don't know. I just can't believe that.
He can't.
They
can't
couldn't make something happen.
Yeah. If they got Tyler Hoechlin in, he's freaking going on and doing Superman. Awesome job as Superman, by the way. If you want to check out a hot man in tights. But yeah, if they got him back, I'm sure Dylan kind of is gonna sneak in there. You know, they gotta make it, run for their money. Nowadays you live and die with the secret reveal of a special guest.
Yeah.
Well, I think they're just saving it. Yeah.
I hope so. I hope they are.
I'm hoping too.
Look, I'll be fine. I'll watch it regardless.
Yeah, me too.
But I hope it does well enough where they'll maybe keep doing these every couple of years.
Just
to see what's going on.
Yeah, just kind of like how Psych does their movies every once in a while. Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah.
Glad we got to geek out.
I'm glad we got to geek out of Teen Wolf, man.
I don't get to geek out over Teen Wolf with very many people.
No, me neither.
one of the greatest assortment of hot guys in a TV show ever.
It's a really awesome adaptation of its source material as well. Like it's like yes, it's a teen show, but it does get deep and it has really good mythical lore. Like really good mythical lore.
They do a good job. Like the violence level.
Oh
is
yeah,
a good level.
perfect.
Like
there's like consequences and stakes. You know, you got people dying and all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good show.
So good show. Good show.
So we went from A Home at the End of the World to Teen Wolf. Series.
Yeah. Very
natural progression.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's how podcasts go. You know, like one minute you're talking about queerness in cinema, and then you're talking about the Teen Wolf show and the voice of Bumblebee.
Teen Wolf
That's
is
true. That's true.
Yep,
It's a pretty short jump. It's a pretty short jump.
Yeah. Teen Wolf is a very queer show.
Yeah, Colton Hayes and I mean Jackson.
God.
Yeah, that whole reveal in the last that last like I think it was like the last 2 episodes. That was a really cool moment. Yeah.
But not to kick out Dylan O'Brien here, but any final thoughts?
No, you never kick out Dylan O'Brien. He'll kick back.
No, right. Bumblebee. He's Bumblebee. I wouldn't mess with him. But any other thoughts you had before we kind of wrap up here on A Home at the End of the World?
Wow. I would just encourage folks to find it. I mean, it's not the easiest film to find, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I still only have a DVD copy of it. I don't even know if it's been released on Blu-ray or not. But however you can check it out, I would encourage you to do so. I think you'll be like, oh, I can't believe I've never seen this film. With Colin Farrell being hotter than Colin Farrell has ever been.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point of this show, we're all about underrated movies and bringing things to people that they might not have seen before. And so this was absolutely a perfect pick, Billy Ray.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to see Colin Farrell with like a Rosie O'Donnell 1980s haircut, like tossing dough in the air.
True.
Yeah.
This is going to be your wet dream.
I know. I want to go to the home cafe. I would definitely
go there.
Right? Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's got to be up there with like some of the greatest restaurants for movies,
Yeah, I would definitely enjoy the home cafe.
Yeah. Well, while I got you here, Billy Ray, what are some like other good like hidden gems like this? Some other great queer cinema that people should. I'm putting you on the spot here, but
so queer cinema. So that's at least you narrowed it down some. I would recommend. I mean, in the similar vein to this, there's a really great film from 1998, I think, called Edge of 17. Which is, it was one of my staples when I was younger, kind of coming up as a queer person. Also a period film, 80s, great soundtrack, very poppy.
So I don't know, because there is another movie that called The Edge of 17.
Yeah, it's not the Haley Steinfeld one. This has got Leah DeLaria in it. Really, really fun movie. I always like to mention Crazy, spelled C.R.A.Z.Y. which was kind of the first big film for Jean-Marc Vallée, the great Jean-Marc Vallée, who's now no longer with us, but who did Wild and Dallas Buyers Club. That was his kind of Quebecois debut, and it's basically about a young gay kid sort of coming of age over the course of several Christmas Eves. And,
I love that trope of like it's every Christmas, like we just talked about. It was just 2 Christmases, but we talked about for our Christmas episode, The Green Knight. I love that storytelling device. Yeah,
it works really well at Crazy. That's one of the films that anytime I turn someone onto it like instantly becomes their favorite film. And then the other one I'll mention is even though it's really not like, I mean, I don't know, maybe it is a little bit. Robin Wright just reminds me of it. Ladies and gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains. I'll just put that out there too, because it's Robin Wright's character in this reminds me of those the girls in the band in that, Laura Dern and Diane Lane, and also just a great fucking film if you've never seen it, and if you want to see a young Ray Winstone, which is a weird thing to see. Those are a few that I would mention that I would recommend. I've got tons. I would say if you want really obscure references, just check out my Letterboxd.
All right, perfect. Ariel, before we wrap up, any last thoughts you wanted to say on the movie here?
I very much enjoyed it. I think like I said earlier, I think that this is like the way that this kind of story works, where it just feels like a real, like, everyday life story. You know, it's just something happening to somebody, and they're not categorized in any way. And I think that's just the best storytelling, and that's why this movie is such like a kind of hidden gem, because it's just a pure story, you know, kind of thing. So
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on, Billy Ray. We mentioned at the beginning you do a lot of things, so the floor is yours. Please tell everybody where they, because I had a great time listening to you. I'm sure all our audience did. So tell them where they can hear more of you.
Well, I do host the Incinerator Podcast. You can find that wherever you find podcasts. Go to incineratorpod.com. We're getting ready to start season 2 on March 9th. So join us for that. I also run Make Believe Film Festival here in Seattle, which is a genre film festival, horror, fantasy, sci-fi, all the best stuff. It's going to be March 23rd through the 26th here in Seattle. So 4 days of amazing films and guests and panels and all sorts of stuff. Scripts Gone Wild is the event series that I host in LA once a quarter. We're getting ready to do The Goonies in April. We're getting our cast ready for that, so that should be a lot of fun. And then finally, I think the last thing to promote is... Oh, wait, no, I'm done. I'm done.
That's it.
I think that's all that matters right now. I think I can stop there.
All right, excellent. Yes, definitely everyone go and check all that stuff out. And after you do that, if you guys want to hear some more from us, we do a couple other podcasts here with the Undercast Company. Me, Ariel, and then our other member, Alan. We do some other stuff. Ariel does her other podcast, You've Never Seen, where she introduces someone to a movie, or they introduce her to a movie that they really should have seen by this point. Have a lot of fun talking about that. Whenever there's a new Marvel property, I get on my soapbox to talk about it on Infinity Stones and Dragon Bones, that sporadic podcast. And then if you guys are still not tired of us, you want to hear more of us, we also have our Patreon. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. By the time this episode drops, we'll have released a little bit ago, our top 10 films of 2022. So we're gonna, all three of us, be listing me, Alan, and Ariel, our top 10 films of 2022. Excited to record that and see how it goes. So if you guys want to listen to that, just $1 or the Patreon. There's a few different tiers, but the lowest tier gets you the podcast, and that is just patreon.com/Undercast Company. And we'd love to have you. We've got our Discord, our Instagram, all that stuff. Just look up Undercast Company. We're all over the place. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Ariel, and thank you again, Billy Ray.
Thanks for being amazing, everyone.